Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. In this video, we will be taking a look at the game Wilderness War, which is a game of the French and Indian War. This is from GMT Games. It's not a new game. It's been around since 2001. It was designed by Volko Ruhnke and the map by Mark Simonich. And this game is a card-driven game. And what we're going to do in this video is look at the extended example of play, which is in the playbook, to give us an idea of how the game plays, and hopefully then we will go on and do the use the CDG solo system from GMT, which has a play sheet for this game, and see how that will allow us to play the game solitaire. So what we're looking at here is just kind of a corner of the map, so you can see, probably you can recognize that we have Connecticut right here, Long Island down here in the corner. Here's New York City, etc., etc. You can see here along the line of lakes north of Albany, we've got the Hudson carry, where you would carry basically a portage from the Hudson River over to the line of lakes that lead up into northern New York and eventually to the St. Lawrence River. So I'm going to zoom out, but just to kind of give you a sense of how the map works. You have various areas. The square boxes here are cultivated settlements, essentially. These are mountains, as you might guess, the brown kind of mountainy shape here. Then we have green shapes, green circles rather, which are wilderness. The lines between are connections, so you can move from the White Mountain south to Concord, for example. You can also travel along waterways. Here you can see Hudson Carry North connects to Ticonderoga, which has a fort. This is a fort. That's a French fort. Down here in Hudson Carry South and North, we have British fort. We have some cities, like Boston here has its own fortress. So it's kind of a second level fort. As opposed to this, which you can see has a 1 in the center. That is a fort, not a fortress. And then you also have these guys right here, which are stockades. Out west, there are Indian settlements. Actually, can we see? Yeah, we can see one right here. It tells that you have the Indian symbol here, and then you can see that the M indicates the tribe. And you can see it also says it outside the circle. It says Mohawk, so that's the Mohawk tribe. Over here, we have the Onondaga. It's off shot right now. Tuscarora down here. And there are more out further to the west, and we'll see that in a little bit. I'm going to try to keep the map fairly zoomed in most of the time so that we can see what we're doing, and we'll just move around and look at various areas as we play. A lot of the action will be to the north of what we're looking at right now, and also to the west. So as I mentioned, we'll be using the Wilderness War playbook. You can see there are some combat examples, and then there's a list of those in here. And we're going to be doing the extended example of play from the year 1757. So this will be 1 year of the game, and it starts on page 8 and runs through 16. So I won't be showing the book itself, but we'll be following through with what it's saying, and I'll be following the actions and playing the cards and everything. So everything is basically set up for play here, and we're going to begin. You can see here we have our sequence of play. So we're in the early season right now, and I'll show you the track there for the turns in a bit. But the first action is deal cards, which I've already done. I actually stacked the hands with the cards that were listed in the example of play. So then we go to the action phases, and the French have the first action in the early season here in 1757. So it says, hoping to prevent the arrival of British reinforcements, the French player begins with play of card 37, British Ministerial Crisis. That's this card right here. Let's zoom. There we go, focus rather. So you can say British player must discard 1 British regulars, Highlanders, light infantry, troop transports, or victories in Germany card if he has any in his hand. Well, now we talk about what does the British player have in his hand. And of the cards listed on the event, the British player is holding only 2 British regulars, so this is the British hand. So we look for our British regular cards, and we have 2 of them as it says. We're going to discard one of them. So now the British action phase, they will use their other British regular card to bring in some reinforcements. So we draw a leader randomly from the leader pool. So you use an opaque cup for that. And because it tells us who was drawn, I'm just going to pick that guy out of the list, out of here, and not actually use the cup. But in regular play, you would, of course, use the cup. So the one we draw out is Murray, who's right here. And one thing I did want to note here, as we look at Murray's counter, is that you have the large standees. If you're familiar with, say, Washington's War, you would have standees as well. And they look like this. They're kind of tall. And there's a base for them, and they stand up on the map. Now, I chose not to use that, as you might suspect, because of the fact that we're looking at a top-down view. And for video purposes, looking at something like this as opposed to something like this, or rather this, would be a little bit better. So that was the thinking there. So we drew Murray, and we enter one new 3-4 unit. So what is a 3-4 unit? So this would be a 3-4 unit. Now I picked up the 46th Murrays because our leader is Murray. It doesn't really matter. It's just a little bit of historical flavor there, a little historical seasoning for us. So we're going to take these guys and we're going to place them on the map. Now, according to the card, you can see we place 3-4 regular units and a leader if available at any ports. Okay, so a lot of the British stuff involves ports because obviously the Royal Navy, being what it was kind of a very nice force multiplier and gave the British a lot of flexibility. So I have 3-3-4 units here in my hand. So we have Murray and 3 units, right? I'm going to put one of these units in New York, and we'll add it to the stack that belongs to Wolf, which is at the bottom, and I'll show that in a moment. These other 3 I'm going to put in my Halifax box, which is right here, to give us a little power because, as we'll see in a moment, we're going to move north towards Louisbourg. So before we move north, as I mentioned, you have these boxes, and the French have a row of boxes at the northern side of the map. So you can see counters in here. So this is Dunbar over here, and Dunbar, the leader counter, is here. So he's in Albany, and his 2 units are in this box here because it helps keep the map uncluttered. So I just wanted to point that out because you'll see, if you're looking at the map, you'll see some leaders and some units that don't have leaders are on the map. But anybody that is attached to a leader, I've placed in the boxes for both the British and the French. Okay, so now we've moved to the north. So here's Halifax, which was at the top of the previous screen, but now it's at the bottom, or bottom-ish here. So here's our British forces. Whoops, I'm moving that with my leg. Okay, so here's Louisbourg, right? So you can see this red arrow, which kind of leads the British. It's a path for the British to use amphibious naval moves to move up and come down the St. Lawrence and start to pressure, Quebec and so on down to Montreal and whatever, and so on down this way, as opposed to using the lakes, which are out to the west. And we'll talk about those later. So it's now the French player's turn again. Now he has a card called Foul Weather here, which plays when an enemy is about to move. So they can use this to thwart a potential naval attack over here. So that in thinking about what the French player would do here, the example of play mentions that they could move some forces into Louisbourg to kind of bulk it up. Because it's obvious the British are going to build up here and attack, because that's kind of what they need to do. So instead, he's going to hold that card because that's a reaction card. And instead, he's going to play 24, the Northern Indian Alliance. So that is this guy right here. So you can play it if you control Montreal. It's blue, the number up here. So if you've played card-driven games, this is pretty familiar stuff. You can play the event if it's your color. And there are some cards, like this guy, that are blue and red. Red, obviously, is the British, where either side can play it. And if it's got this brown box on it with the title, that means you can play it in reaction. So here we have and the number here is used for activation purposes. Other things you can do besides the event. You can play it for the value or you can play the event. So in this case, they're going to play the event. And it says place blue and or if you have a fort at Niagara, which they do, blue orange striped Indian units totaling half a die roll rounded up or a full roll if French victory points are greater than 4. French victory points at the start of the game are at 4, not greater than 4. So place units at their settlement. For every one you could place, you may instead restore 2 to full. So if you have a reduced one, you could, if you had 2 reduced units, you could restore them with this card. So they're going to play this card. It does not have a remove at the bottom. You can see this one has a remove. So when it's played for its event, it's removed from play. This one is being played for its event, but it does not say remove, which means it can be used again. So the French player rolls a die. He gets a 4. 4 gets half to a 2, so he can place 2 Indian units. And the 2 he chooses, one will be an Algonquin, which we can place here, and the other will be a Caughnawaga, which can be placed here. So we're going to do that. So here you see our Indian units. So we have this guy right here is an Algonquin, and they're 1/6, so they're not all that strong combat-wise, but they have a lot of movement capability. And then this one is the other one. They're all identical. The blue stripe indicates what area they can kind of come in on. So it's kind of like a border around it. And they're northern tribes. So you have northern tribes, western tribes, southern tribes, etc. So we're going to put our Caughnawaga here and our Algonquin here. And we have to place our French allied markers. So you have allied markers, which are these guys right here. And one side is French, and the other side is British. And no, I did not clip my counters, but I probably will at some point. So they get to go on the settlements here to mark that they are allied with the French. But those markers mean that those locations are allied to the French, which also means they are susceptible to British raids. So the British would now be able to raid those settlements. So now we go back to the British player. So the British player has an amphibious landing card, which is this guy right here. You can see it's red for British. It can be used as a reaction, and it says for that, play after naval move along amphib arrow may not be played same year after Louisbourg squadrons. The unit or force may land in a French occupied or controlled space. Place an amphib marker. So since the British player sees that the French guy has not made an effort to reinforce Louisbourg, he's going to take a shot at going after it. So he's going to play card 31, which is this guy right here. Now, he can't play it for the event because it's blue, so he's going to play it for the value. And it does not get removed because we're not playing it for the event. So you can use this for the activation of a 3 initiative leader or less. So the British player will designate Abercrombie as subordinate. Now, the example book talks about Loudon and Loudon being in command, but I have Abercrombie and Wolfe because I followed the setup for this scenario from the setup, the campaign, the scenario setup. So I'm going to say that Wolfe is overall in charge and Abercrombie is subordinate to, or nope, I screwed this up. These guys should be with Loudon, so I messed that up. All right. So Loudon is subordinate to Abercrombie. So together their activation force limit is 14. Because if we look at their counters here, the 7 there. So the 3 means that they're able to be activated by a 3 value card. So you have 3 and 7. The 7 is the indicator of how many units they can activate or command. So they can control 14 total, which is more than enough to command the 344 and 434 units in New York City. Nevertheless, as not all these units will be needed for a maximum strength attack on Louisbourg, the British player opts to leave 144 Royal American and 134 regular at New York City as a reserve for the Hudson River corridor, which is off map, but he naval moves the 2 leaders and other 5 units to Halifax, a British port. Because the force was already in the Loudon box, the player can simply move Loudon to Halifax. So we can do that. Make sure to move 144 and 134 from the Loudon box to New York City. Okay, so despite the overwhelming force at Halifax, the French player presses on with his plans in the interior. He plays card number 44. Okay, now this is a British event. French are playing it, so they can't play the event, but they can play for the 2. To individually activate the Algonquin and Caughnawaga units, which each count for half an activation because they're Indians. So these 2 activate for 1 activation point. And he'll also activate the leader Montcalm, who's here in Montreal. And you can see his cost is 1. And he's able to command 6 units. Indian units and Montcalm individually move to Ticonderoga, which is down here, and they can do that. So they have 6 movement. So these 2 and Montcalm are going to move 1, 2, 3, basically 4 down here. So the movement of these 2 and Montcalm was boat movement, because they can use the water connections here to go down, which gives you a lot more movement than moving over land. You have 3 types of movement. You have the naval movement, boat movement, and land movement. So these units go here, and Vandreuil himself is in Montreal already. He's right there. And I knocked my stack over. There's a lot here, obviously. Narrow 2 Indian units will go in here because they're under Montcalm now. So now it's back to the British player. And the British player responds to the threat in the Hudson Carry by playing number 22. Governor Vaudreuil interferes. And again, and I didn't say this at the beginning, but I'm likely to butcher a ton of names in this, so please don't hold that against me. So here's the card they're going to play. Now this is a British card. So they're going to play this as an event. Okay, so it says choose any 2 unbesieged French leaders on the map and reverse their locations. You may not choose Louisbourg if Louisbourg squadron removal has disallowed French naval movement. So we're going to discard that card, which is reusable. And we get to swap the positions of 2 leaders. And we're going to swap Montcalm and Vaudreuil. And then we have to swap the units as well. Okay, now the French player could use another card to move Montcalm back into position, but decides instead the force already at Ticonderoga is sufficient, and he plays number 32, which is this guy right here. So obviously a British event can't play it for the event, so he's going to use the 2 up here. So he's got 2 active 2 points that he can use. So he's going to activate Rigaud with Bougainville, the 2 regulars, 1 Carror, and 2 Indian units, and move the force. Doesn't matter if it's land or boat, into Hudson Carry North, which is Fort William Henry. That's here. So he's going to take these 3. Actually, he's not taking Vaudreuil. He's taking these guys and bringing them to Hudson Carry North. Oh, I screwed this up. I should have put Bougainville in Rigaud's box. So we'll just move Rigaud here. So he's got, under him, he's got, let's see. So these are the units that are moving. We've got 2, 3, 4 drilled troops that are French. Then you've got your extra leader. You've got your 2 French units and a courier, or Carror. I think it's courier, but they're like French Rangers, basically. So we're going to have a battle now because they are in the British space. So the British player must decide whether he's in a regular space and he has drilled troops with him, as opposed to just auxiliaries, which are the circular counters, which represent the Indians and the irregular forces, Rangers on the British side, and couriers on the French side. So the British player must decide whether to attempt to avoid battle out of the space. So you can always attempt to avoid battle, where you roll a die and basically, disappear into the wilderness, or intercept into it, or neither. So without a leader in the space, only one of the two provincial units there could avoid. Up to all 4 units with Webb adjacent at Hudson Carry South, which is Fort Edward. That's these guys here, and there's Webb. Could attempt to intercept. However, the British player does not want to commit to a large battle, because losing a battle involving more than 4 friendly units costs a victory point. He decides to reinforce William Henry with only a single unit, in this case, the Rangers. So under Webb, we have Rogers here. He was in Webb's box, and so he is at Fort Edward here, Hudson Carry South. So he is going to move up here to reinforce, and they're going to intercept. The interception succeeds on a roll of 4. So we do have a red die for the British and a blue die for the French. So that interception succeeded. And the Rangers unit at Hudson Carry South is placed at Hudson Carry North. That's how they moved from here to here, because it was an interception. And the French will attack at least the Rangers in a battle. So now the British player must decide whether the 2 provincial units will defend outside the fort along with the Rangers, or remain inside. The British player decides to risk the units in a field battle, in part because he risks no victory points with his small force, while a victory would earn 1 victory point, because the French force contains regulars, and even if it had no regulars, it still has more than 4 units. So the players resolve the battle. The attacker, that would be the French, has no cards or no events that can be used in the battle. The British are holding an ambush event, but can't play it because the French have more auxiliaries, with 2 Indians and 1 courier unit, than the British, who only have the Rangers unit in the battle. The players consult the CRT, which is right here. Here's our CRT. You look at the combat strength of both sides. So you've got modifiers here. There are no die roll modifiers, so none of these affect anything. The French commander Rigaud has a tactical rating of 0. So if we looked at him here, the blue number in the box is a 0. That's his tactical rating, so he gets no effect. So the French player rolls a 3. You can take my word for it. He rolls a 3 for a result of 2 step losses on the British. So basically you add up the combat strength. So our combat strength on the French side, we have 2 3s, which is 6, and then we have 3 1s, so that is 9. So if you're greater than 7, and then you look across and you roll the 3, it's 2. So there are the 2 step losses. Now the British, who have a combat strength of 2, 4, 6, roll a 4. So they're in the 6th column and they rolled a 4. So they also inflict 2 step losses on the French. So the British will flip their 2 provincial units, so not Rogers, but the other 2, to their reduced side. So this is their full strength side. Our New Hampshire provincials, they get flipped to the reduced side, and the same for our New Jersey unit. So both of these guys get flipped. Rogers stays. And the first French casualty must be a drilled unit, so the French player flips 1, 3, 4 regular, and then flips the Algonquin Indian unit. No one rolled a natural 1 or 6, so there are no leader lost checks. So yeah, as I just read, if you roll a 1 or a 6, natural 1 or 6, not DRM'd to that number, you have to roll a check to see if the leader is killed. Because the defender wins a tie, Regard and his force must retreat whence they came. So back to the fort at Ticonderoga they go, and the British receive a victory point, which slides the victory point counter from 4. That's +4 for the French to a +3. So moves it 1 towards the British. Flip one of these guys here, and we flip our Algonquin as well. All right. So now we would go back to the British. The British player decides to draw upon his reserve at New York City to beef up the defense of William Henry. He plays card number 12, which is this guy. To individual, it's got 1. It's usable by either side, but he's not playing it for ambush. He's just going to use the 1 activation to activate the 4/4 Royal American, which is in New York City. This guy right here, and he's going to use boat movement to bring the 4/4 up the Hudson to Hudson carry south. So I know New York is off camera, but it's going to come up this way and appear. Wow, I didn't even realize that the battle was mostly out of camera shot there. So here's Hudson carry south. So I apologize for that. I thought that was on the shot and it wasn't. Here's south, here's north. So this guy is going to go to Hudson carry south by going up the river, and will now be under Webb. So we can actually put his counter under Webb. And the French cannot intercept because the British control the area. So the French player could have used his foul weather card to slow down the Royal American, but he wants to hold it to block the attack on Louisbourg that will undoubtedly be coming. So now we go back to the French. So having botched his attack on Lake George, the French player decides to take advantage of political conflicts between the British Crown and its colonies to pressure their frontiers. He plays card number 41. British colonial politics. Slide the provincial assemblies marker 1 box in a favorable direction. If the French play, the British player must remove provincials as needed. Okay, so here we see our victory point track. So that started at 4 for the French here, and it's now on 3. And I know I'm making shadows, so I'm not going to try to point as much. So over here is I saw part of it's cut off, but you have the British provincial assemblies track, which starts at supportive. So you have a maximum of 4 southern and 10 northern provincial units on the map. It moves to reluctant. And what reluctant does is it makes you remove or allows a limit of 2 southern and 6 northern provincials. So the British only have 6 northern provincials on map as it is, but you can kind of see down here there are a couple of southern ones. This is a Virginia unit. There is a Maryland unit, and there are also several more. So we will remove southern units at Shamokin and at Shepherd's Ferry. So here's Shepherd's Ferry, and we'll remove one from Shamokin as well. And that will satisfy the requirements of that. Okay, so we're back to the British now, and we're going to well, it says the British player sees the thinning of his defenses in the south, but nevertheless attempts to seize the initiative by launching his major operation for the season, an amphibious assault on Louisbourg, right here. So he plays card number 28, which is a 3, not playing it for the event. So he's playing it for the 3. So he's activating all the leaders and units under them in Halifax. The French player can obviously see what is coming, and immediately before the British player moves his force, he's going to play card number 14, foul weather. So this, no naval movement is allowed. That's the key thing. So this is a very useful card if you are on the defense and your opponent is trying to do something. You can play that. So the event's name has a brown background around it and therefore can be played as a response in the middle of an action phase. The British force is prevented from any naval move and therefore is stuck at Halifax for its activation. The French player, of course, now suspects that his opponent is indeed holding an amphibious landing card, which he is. The question remains whether either of the other two cards in the British hand are three value cards that could allow a naval move by more than an individual unit. The French player decides to risk that possibility, to ignore the maritime threat, and to press his border war on the British colony. So he's going to play card number 36, which is this guy right here, Francois Bigot, but he's playing it for the 2 because this is a British event. He's playing it for the 2, and he's going to activate the Huron and Mississauga, which each perform boat movement. So the Huron and the Mississauga up here. So here's Huron. They're under Montcalm, so they are up here in Montreal. And there's the Mississauga. They're going to perform boat movement, representing canoes, of course, along the 7 spaces from Montreal to Oneida Carry West. So here's Montreal, and they're not going to be under Montcalm anymore. They're moving on their own. So they're going to move down the river into Lake Ontario, and then through Oswego, they're going to go to Oneida Carry West. And that only costs 1 activation point because, again, auxiliaries only cost a half a point. So that's 1. Now, with the other point, they're going to activate the Shawnee and Mingo, and they're going to move to Allegheny South, which is here. Now, they do have a movement of 6, so you might say, well, that's 1, 2, but the mountain is an automatic stop. So they're going to take these 2 guys, and they're going to go 1, 2, and stop here in Allegheny South. So the British provincial here in Winchester, this Virginia guy, they do have a connection. So you might think, well, maybe they can intercept, but they cannot intercept individual auxiliary units entering Allegheny South because that is a mountain space. So if this were not a mountain space, they could Winchester could attempt an interception, but because it is a mountain space, they cannot. So the turn reverts to the British. They have 3 cards left. None of them are 3 value cards. So he is going to instead, and what that means is they cannot activate the units at Halifax because you need a 3 value card to do a naval movement for anything more than just 1 unit. So he's going to play number 5, which is this guy right here, and it's a 1, and he's going to play it for construction. So this is one of the other things you can do besides movement. You can do construction. And we're going to complete the fort at Winchester, which is right here. So you can see that, and Shepherd's Ferry has the same thing. That's the uncompleted fort sign. Okay, a pickaxe and a shovel, as you might expect. So we're going to flip this guy to the completed side. And that frees up the southern unit there for intercepting, chasing, or blocking the Shawnee and Mingo. So these guys, if they go to, say, Woodstock, they can intercept. So depending on where they go, they can possibly chase them or intercept them, etc. Gives them a little bit of some flexibility. That's a 2 power unit, and these guys are both 1s. They are auxiliaries, which gives them a little bit of special abilities in wilderness stuff, but these are not wilderness. These are cultivated settlements, basically. Okay, so now the French also have 2 cards. And they're going to play this one, Colonial Recruits, and they're going to play it for the 2 to activate the same 4 Indian units that we did in the previous action phase. So you can it says to kind of tilt them, so if you turn them sideways or something to show that they're going to move. These are obviously the southern ones. The ones that are up in Mississauga are kind of off shot right now, and rather than they're actually right up here. I'm going to tilt them anyway for my own reference. So the Mingo are going to use what's called infiltrate through Augusta to avoid interception from Winchester. So having ended movement in an enemy cultivated space, the unit must raid and rolls on the cultivated column of the raid table. So here is the raid table, right here. And he would roll on the cultivated column as opposed to the stockade Indian settlement or blockhouse column. So he'll be rolling on here. There are no modifiers, so none of these apply. None of the modifiers apply. The player rolls a 4, which is a failed raid. It doesn't say success, so the 1 in this case indicates number equals raider step loss suffered. There's only 1 unit in here, so he's going to lose a step, and he has to retreat to his home settlement back up here at Mingo. Okay, so the Shawnee is going to repeat the same thing, but he's going to go to Culpeper. So he's going to pass through Augusta and go to Culpeper and do a raid. Now there's no modifiers here either, but again we're going to be rolling against. Wait, Augusta has a stockade. I suppose it wasn't supposed to, maybe in the setup for this. Maybe I set it up incorrectly, but I read that Augusta had a stockade. Anyway, the game was acting like it wasn't, so I'm just going to pull that off. So he's going to sneak through here and go to Culpeper and attempt a raid. He's going to also fail. Actually, no, he doesn't fail. He rolls a 5, and a 5 is a success and a step loss. So he's going to take a step loss. And he has to retreat back to Logstown. But they get a raided marker for having been raided. And we put a raided marker on Culpeper. And that's a half a victory point for the French. Okay, so next, the Huron. So let me pull my Huron out here. That guy's also activated. They're going to try a daring move here. So they're going to go through Oneida, carry east, Kanajahari, Schoharie, and infiltrate Albany on their way to Kinderhook. So they're going to come in here in Albany, which is a fortress. So there are units in Albany under Dunbar. He's got 2 drilled units here. These 2 guys right here are in Albany, in the fortress there. The drilled units at Schenectady and Albany, so we have drilled units here under Johnson as well. They cannot intercept the lone auxiliary Huron in any of the traversed wilderness spaces, and the Huron auxiliary can enter an enemy fortress space because it's attempting to infiltrate. The British player can now attempt an intercept in Albany with any 1 unit or force in Albany, Schenectady, or Hudson Carry South. He does not want to redeploy any units, so attempts with a regular at Albany. So one of our units I just showed you, but he fails because he rolls a 3. So he rolls a 3 and fails. The Huron has passed through the enemy cultivated space in Albany and gets to Kinderhook, and so must stop at Kinderhook, where it raids. The roll is a 6, which is a success with no losses. So if we look on our table, cultivated 6 would be a success, no number, no losses. A rated marker is placed in Kinderhook, and our Huron returns home to Paysden and Haut, which is up here. You can see Huron, that's their home. So we're going to put him in there. And then finally, we have the Mississauga here. Mississauga is going to move by land due south to Station Point. So he's going to go south to Station Point, which is here. So he's going to move 1, 2, 3, 4. Then to East Delaware. So that's 5. And into the stockade space of Easton. Because the would-be raiders have ended in an otherwise empty stockade space in the southern department, which is Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, the British may deploy a militia unit from that department's militia box, and they do have one. It is off camera. Let me reset my shot because I just remembered that I just moved this off shot. Okay, so Mississauga is here in Easton, which has a stockade, as you can see. The S indicates it is in the southern department, I believe, is what, maybe? I don't know. I forget, really. But there is a militia unit here that can be used to force a battle before the raid attempt. So we're going to put this guy up here in Easton. And because they have a stockade, they're going to get a -1, and they have to attack it. So it's 1-on-1, and they get a -1 DRM. So as we can see here on our attacking units in a stockade is a -1 DRM. And we're going to end up in the 1 column here. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for this unit to successfully win this battle. Both sides roll on the 1 column, as I just mentioned. In this case, the Mississauga and the militia each achieve no effect, with the result a tie. The Mississauga attacker, having lost the battle, must retreat to East Delaware. He's going back that way. The militia unit returns to its southern militia box. If the East Delaware space, where this unit ended up, was a cultivated space, this would result in a raid, but it is not. It is wilderness, so nothing happens. So now, after that eventful French turn, we would go back to the British for their 7th action phase. So in his action phase, the British player cannot build any stockades in response to the raids, because construction is not allowed on 2 turns in a row, 2 action phases in a row, so we cannot use a card to do another construction. There are no longer any Indians nearby to chase off with the provincial at Winchester, which is over here. So he continues to reinforce William Henry by activating the 3-4 at New York City, which you actually you can see, it's right there. There's no leader in New York at the moment, so we do have this unit here. He's going to activate that with card number 28, or 38 rather, which is this one, provincial regiments. Whoops, I'm not getting any focus there. Provincial regiments dispersed for frontier duty. He's playing it for the 2. This is obviously a French event. So he's going to take our unit here and boat move to Hudson carry north. So he can shoot right up the Hudson here, all the way up to Hudson carry north. He'll join that group right up there. Then we come to the French. Each side only has 1 card left, so he's going to play his final card, number 48, Victories in Germany. He's going to play it as an event. This is one that can be played by either side. Play after 1755. French may not play after Quiberon or if Quebec is British controlled. Roll a die and restore to full strength that number of reduced regular or light infantry units. So basically units coming from the 7 Years' War over in Europe. So the French roll their die. Well, no, he only has 1 reduced regular unit in the regard box, meaning at Ticonderoga. So he's going to flip that to full strength. That would be this guy right here. And we're going to flip him back to full strength and return him to Rigaud's box. And now the British have the last card, number 17, Amphibious Landing, which he wants to hold on to because he can use it next season for attacking Louisbourg. So he will hold that card. So that guarantees that he'll have the event available for the planned assault on Louisbourg. He places the British card-held marker on the early season 1757 space of the year track as a reminder that he will not be permitted to so hold a card in the following season. So with all the cards now having been played, we put our British card held in here, and we would move to the late season. And you have some events that are written in here from historical standpoint. You can see the victory points. Actually, the 2 successful raids were half a victory point, so they actually would go back to 4. So the blue is the French track. You can see the British track starts here and goes in the other direction. And if either side gets to 11, so basically gets off the track, they win the game. So that is going to wrap up this video. I might do the second half of this, which will be the late season turn, where we're going to draw more cards and go through everything again. And I'll post that as a separate video. That way, if you want to see both early and late season, you can do so. So look for that in the not too distant future. here coming up on the channel. So for now, that'll do it. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would. That would be greatly appreciated. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. I hope I didn't screw it up too much. But yeah, that's going to wrap it for now. I'm Joe. This is Hexed Encountered. And until next time, as always, happy gaming.